Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep. Welcome to yet another episode of the Knowledge Series. Today, let me simplify Preamble for you. But before we start, why don't you press the like button, comment once the stream is over, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, and share the links of these sessions with your friends and fellow aspirants. December 9, 1946. Constituent Assembly met for the first time. What was the purpose? The task was to draft the constitution of the newly independent India. But through this constitution, what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals that we intend to achieve through this constitution? That is reflected in the preamble. For example, if we intend to establish a sovereign India, a democratic India, a republic India, that is reflected in the preamble. If we want to establish equality, if we want to provide liberty, equality, justice, fraternity to every single individual in India, that is reflected in the preamble. So long story short, preamble is like the identity card of the Constitution. Preamble is like the philosophy of the Constitution of India. So preamble is like the goals and objectives that we intend to achieve through this constitution. That is reflected in the preamble. If you look at preamble, this is something that the Supreme Court has also said repeatedly, that the ideals and goals which the makers of the Constitution of India wanted to achieve, that is set out in the preamble. In Golaknath versus State of Punjab, 1967, Supreme Court said that in a nutshell, the ideals and the aspirations of the people of this country are reflected in the preamble. But not just this. When you read a book, there is a preface to this book. What does this preface tell us? It gives us an introduction to this book. It tells us what this book is all about. But not just that, it also unlocks the minds of the author of this book, the writer of this book. Similarly, we have the preamble, which is like the preface to a book, and this book is the Constitution. This preamble not only tells us what this book is all about, what the Constitution is all about, but it also unlocks the minds of the makers of our Constitution. It is a key to open the mind of the makers of this constitution. And this is what the Supreme Court said in 1960 in Birubari Union case. And this preamble is based on the objectives resolution of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Pandit Nehru moved and introduced objectives resolution in the Constituent Assembly, and this objectives resolution was adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 22nd January 1947. But what is this objectives resolution? Pandit Nehru gave a speech in the Constituent Assembly. He said, if we want to erect a building, we should also have a vision as to how this building should look like. Once we have that vision, then we will decide how the bricks should be placed so that we erect this building. Then we will also decide the raw material that will be used to erect such a building. Similarly, if we want in this Constituent Assembly to write and draft the constitution of an independent India, what should be our vision? What should be our goal? What should be our objective? For that, I am moving an objectives resolution. This is what we want to achieve through this constitution. And in this objectives resolution, Pandit Nehru said, we want to provide liberty, equality, justice. We want to establish an independent sovereign country. We want to provide benefits to the minorities, to the weaker, to the downtrodden sections of the society. Long story short, what is a preamble? Preamble, on one hand, is the introduction to the Constitution. It's like the philosophy of the Constitution. Through this Constitution, what do we intend to achieve? That is reflected, that is set out in the preamble. And it is also used to unlock the minds of those who drafted our Constitution, who wrote our Constitution. And this preamble is based on the objectives resolution which was moved by Pandit Nehru, and adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 22nd January 1947. Now let me tell you and show you the text of the preamble. We, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens justice, social, economic, political, liberty of thought, equality, fraternity, dignity of an individual. And when we look at this preamble text, we can break it into 4 themes. So there are 4 themes that come out of the text of the preamble. Which are these 4 themes? Number 1, we the people. And what does it say? What does it convey? It conveys what is the source of authority of our Constitution. What is the source of authority of the Constitution? Constitution derives its power from the people of this country. That is what is mentioned in the preamble. We the people of India. That means this Constitution is the gift to the people of this country by the people themselves. So the first theme that comes out of the preamble is we the people, which means the source of authority of the Constitution are the people of this country. That's number 1. The second theme that comes out, that reflects out of the preamble, is what is going to be the nature of the Indian state. And what is the nature of the Indian state? Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. What is this nature? Now listen to me carefully. If you look at all these terms, it is in capital letters and there is no punctuation mark as well. There is no comma separating socialist from secular, from democratic, from republic. What does it convey? It conveys that this is a composite expression. What do we mean by a composite expression? That means it's like a one big promise. We can't separate one from the other. That means the state that we want to establish should be sovereign. Sovereignty means that India would be independent to take a decision of its own. We have the independence to make a decision, to unmake a decision without any interference from a foreign power. That's sovereignty. Second, socialist. Now, socialism primarily means in Indian context that the inequality in income, inequality in status should be eradicated so that we establish a welfare state. That's socialist. Secular. India was partitioned. 15th August 1947, the country was partitioned and an Islamic Pakistan was created. A theocratic Pakistan was created in the name of religion. But the founding fathers of our country decided not to make a theocratic nation, not to establish a theocratic nation, a religious nation, but a secular state, where the Indian state will not proclaim any religion as the state religion. And this is something unique. Look at our neighborhood. We have an Islamic Pakistan, we have an Islamic Bangladesh, we have Buddhism as one sort of a state religion in Myanmar, in Sri Lanka as well. But India stays secular. That means India will not proclaim any religion as its state religion, and we will equally promote, equally protect, respect all the religions of this country. And at the same time, another nature of Indian state is democratic. Every 5 years, people will come out in large numbers and will vote for a government so that this government can govern us. But after every 5 years, we will then hold our political class accountable. If they have done something good for us, we will vote them back to power. If they haven't, then we will vote them out. Democratic. That's the nature of the Indian state. And at the same time, republic. What do we mean by the republican nature of the Indian state? The head of the state. Who is the head of the state? The President of India. The President of India is an elected individual. He or she is not holding this position because of its hereditary. The Queen of England is holding that position because of her hereditary. But the head of the Indian state, who is the President of India, is an elected individual. And this office is open to all, without any discrimination on the grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. That is the nature of the Indian state. Which means preamble, it conveys four important themes. Theme number one, what is the source of authority of our constitution? The constitution derives its power from the people of this country. Second theme, what is going to be the nature of the Indian state? Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. And all these terms are not separated by any punctuation mark. They are in capital letters, which means treat them as one phrase, as a composite expression. The third theme, what are going to be the objectives of this constitution? If we want to provide the constitution to the newly independent country, what are the objectives that we want to establish? And the objectives are justice, not just in social sphere, but in economic sphere as well, in political sphere as well. In political sphere, there should be no discrimination between man and a man in political sphere. Not just justice, equality, liberty, fraternity, from north to south, from east to west, regardless of our diversity, regardless of our differences. We are a land of diversity, different cuisine, different sartorial sense, different dressing sense, different languages, different tribes, different religions, different languages. Despite that, we are one, fraternity. And this was the slogan of the French Revolution as well. Liberty, equality, fraternity. And these are the objectives that we want to achieve, that we intend to achieve through this constitution. So the third theme that is conveyed in the text of the preamble is what are going to be the objectives of this constitution. And the last one, date of adoption. When was the Constitution of India adopted? And it was adopted on 26th November 1949. And this date, 26th November 1949, is widely celebrated as the Constitution Day. But then this constitution came into effect on 26th January 1950, and it is this date, 26th January every year, which is celebrated as the Republic Day, when the Constitution was enacted, when the Constitution came into force. But why this difference? If the Constitution was adopted on 26th November 1949, why did it enter into force on 26th January 1950? Why? For that, there is a story. And the story goes back to 1929. A historic session of the Indian National Congress was held in Lahore. And it was in this historic session in December 1929 that the Indian National Congress, which was the principal political party fighting for India's independence, it raised a slogan, it raised a demand. And the demand was of Purna Swaraj, complete independence. Prior to 1929, the leaders of the nationalist movement, they were asking for piecemeal concessions from the British. Some of them at some time were wanting that more and more Indians should be enrolled, should be appointed to bureaucracy, to civil services. Some of them at some point in time asked for home rule. Some of them at some point in time asked for Swaraj, not complete independence, home rule. That means the ultimate sovereignty will lie with the Queen of England. But please give us the power to make laws for the people of this country. But we will not be sovereign. The sovereignty will lie with the Queen of Britain. But it was in 1929, at this historic session of the Indian National Congress conducted in Lahore, that the Indian National Congress said, enough is enough. Now we need complete independence, Purna Swaraj. And it was in this historic session that it was decided, now onwards, we will celebrate Independence Day. Every 26th January, we will celebrate Independence Day as a symbolic gesture. And the first Independence Day was celebrated on 26th January 1930. So this date, 26 January, was very important because that is when for the first time we celebrated our Independence Day. Although as a symbolic gesture, because we were still not independent, Pandit Nehru requested the Constituent Assembly that we should celebrate this date, 26 January. And let's enact this constitution. Let's ensure that this constitution enters into force on 26 January 1950. And that is how, although constitution was adopted on 26 November 1949, which is celebrated as the Constitution Day, but it came into force on 26 January 1950, which is celebrated as the Republic Day. Now, is preamble part of the Indian Constitution or not? The year was 1960. In Berubari Union case, the Supreme Court said no, preamble is not part of the Constitution. 13 years later, 24th April 1973, in a historic judgment, in a landmark judgment, Keshavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala, 13 judges of the Supreme Court said preamble is part of the Constitution. But why? If in 1960 preamble was not part of the Constitution, how in 1973 the Supreme Court is ruling that preamble is part of the Constitution? For that, I'll tell you the context. The Constitution of India, how was it adopted? Every article was debated thoroughly, discussed thoroughly, and then voted upon. Should we have right to equality? It was discussed and then voted upon. When the majority voted in favor of right to equality became part of the Constitution. When the majority voted in favor of freedom of speech and expression, it became part of the Constitution. When the majority voted in favor of giving some powers to the President, most of the powers to the Prime Minister and his Council of Ministers, it was discussed thoroughly, threadbare, voted upon, and then it became part of the Constitution. In the similar fashion, preamble was also discussed thoroughly. Preamble was also voted upon, and that is how preamble became part of the Constitution. In fact, preamble was the last item added to the Constitution. Preamble was the last item voted upon, and then it became part of the Constitution. This story was not conveyed to the Supreme Court in Berubari Union case. In Berubari Union case, the Supreme Court was not conveyed that just like any other part of the Constitution, preamble was also discussed, thoroughly discussed threadbare, and then voted upon. This story was not conveyed to the court. But this story was conveyed to the court in 1973 in Keshavananda Bharati judgment, and when it came to light that just like any other part of the Constitution, preamble was also discussed, preamble was also voted upon, then the court said that preamble is the part of Indian Constitution. I can now sense one question that you might have. Sir, you said preamble is based on the Objectives Resolution which was moved by Pandit Nehru, adopted by the Constituent Assembly on 22nd January 1947. Then how are you saying that preamble was the last item voted upon and added to the Constitution? Preamble is based on the Objectives Resolution. But preamble is different, Objectives Resolution is different. So why was preamble the last item added to the Constitution? To ensure that preamble, which is the philosophy of the Constitution, preamble, which is the identity card of the Constitution, this preamble should be compatible with every single provision of the Constitution. So that there is no article in the Constitution, no provision in the Constitution which should conflict with the preamble. That is why preamble was the last item added to the Constitution. To give you an example, if the preamble talks about freedom of belief, which basically means freedom of religion, freedom to practice religion. And what if we do not have freedom of religion as a fundamental right? What if we don't have Article 25, which talks about freedom of every single person in India to profess your religion, to practice your religion, to propagate your religion? What if freedom of religion is not a fundamental right, but freedom of thought and belief is mentioned in the preamble? It would make preamble conflict, incompatible with the Constitution. That is why, since preamble is the philosophy, identity card of the Constitution, to ensure that preamble is not incompatible with every single or any single provision of the Constitution. Preamble was the last item voted upon, and then it became part of the Constitution. So what have we understood as of now? What is the preamble? What are the goals that we intend to achieve through this Constitution that is set out, that is reflected in the preamble? And this preamble is based on the objectives resolution of Pandit Nehru. And when we look at the text of the preamble, we can come across 4 themes reflecting in the preamble. 1, we the people, the source of authority of the Constitution, are the people of this country. Second, what is the nature of the Indian state? Sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic, republic. What are the objectives of the Constitution? Justice, liberty, equality, fraternity, dignity, and the date on which the Constitution was adopted. Now, quick points. The United States Constitution was the first one to begin with preamble. In fact, a lot of constitutions in different parts of the world, they have a preamble. But the form, shape, and length of preamble may vary from constitution to constitution. But the US Constitution was the first one to begin with the preamble. It also begins with we the people. That's number 1. Number 2, preamble and the basic structure. Can preamble be amended? Yes. And that is how preamble was amended. The year was 1976. 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act was passed. And 3 words were added to the preamble. One was socialist, the other was secular, the third was integrity of. If you look at the text of the preamble, this term socialist, secular, and integrity of the nation, it was added to the preamble by a 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act 1976, which means preamble can be amended. But at the same time, we say preamble or the objectives mentioned in the preamble, it is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. And what is this basic structure? 24th April 1973. A landmark judgment was delivered by the Supreme Court, by 13 judges of the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said that there is something called basic structure. And what is this basic structure? Yes, Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution. Yes, Parliament has the power to take recourse to Article 368, and through Article 368, it can amend the Constitution. But don't you dare touch the basic structure. There are some basic fundamental features which are present in our Constitution, which Parliament cannot change, which Parliament cannot alter, which Parliament cannot modify. And one such basic structure are the nature mentioned in the preamble, the objectives mentioned in the preamble. Which means you cannot replace the word secular with a theocratic or a Hindu Rashtra or an Islamic state. You can't do that because preambular objectives, the nature, is part of the basic structure of the Constitution. But you can always enrich preamble to add more features, to add more objectives without altering whatever is already present in the preamble. So you can amend the preamble using Article 368 without altering, without disturbing what already is mentioned and present in the preamble. Third important point, preamble by itself is not enforceable in a court of law. What does that mean? If your fundamental right is violated, what is the option? Approach the Supreme Court under Article 32. Approach a High Court under Article 226 of the Constitution, which means fundamental rights are enforceable in a court of law. If these fundamental rights are violated by the state, you can drag the state to the Supreme Court or to the High Courts of this country. But preamble by itself, since it is a philosophy, it's the identity, it is not by itself enforceable in a court of law. You cannot approach the court and ask the Supreme Court that preamble is not enforced. Please enforce it. That's something that cannot happen. But then you might be wondering, if preamble by itself is not enforceable in a court of law, then what is the significance of preamble? Why do we need it? Preamble can be used and is used to interpret the provisions where the language is ambiguous. What does that mean? I'll give you one simple example. 2017, 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court had to decide in K.S. Puttaswamy case as to whether right to privacy is a fundamental right or not. Because right to privacy is not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. But now the court has to decide whether right to privacy is provided by the Constitution or not under Article 21. The Supreme Court relied on the preamble. The Supreme Court said, look at preamble. It is the philosophy of the Constitution. It unlocks the minds of the makers of our Constitution. And one of the objectives of the Constitution, which is mentioned in the preamble, is the dignity of an individual. We cannot assure dignity of an individual if there is no privacy. If there is privacy, then there is dignity for an individual. And that is why the court said, 9-judge bench of the Supreme Court said in 2017, in K.S. Puttaswamy case, that right to privacy is a fundamental right, guaranteed under Article 21 of the Constitution by looking at the preamble. Because preamble talks about dignity of an individual, and this dignity is not possible without privacy. That is all that you need to know regarding preamble of the Indian Constitution. We, the people of India, that means the source of authority of the Constitution, are the people of this country. This Constitution is the gift of the people of this country to themselves. Now let me take some of your questions and then we will wrap this session. How come sir has the same rhythm and energy throughout the session? That I don't know. Okay, I think there are not many questions. I think it's crystal clear to all of you. Thank you for being with us. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and once the stream is over, please drop in your comments. I'll personally reply to all your comments. Thank you for being with us. Have a great time. Good night. Goodbye.